Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Anchor Lake podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Gushman, joined by my co-hosts.
Peter Mang.
Josh Fernandez.
And Jaden Wyatt.
And we also have a very special guest, Jake Meyer, joining us live from the Emory Eagles.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're glad to have you, Jake. So for those who may not know, Jake is the defending national champion in the men's 100 breaststroke in Division III, currently owns the top time in the country and the only A cut in that event so far this year. So we're super stoked to have you on here, Jake. Really want to just get on here and sort of break down your training thus far this year and sort of what your outlook is moving forward. So I guess we can jump right into it. Given that the 100 breast is sort of your bread and butter, what have you been doing, this year, and especially last year when you sort of really made the big leap to go from, 54 low A finalist to national champion in that 100 breaststroke? Sort of walk me through that and sort of how your approach has evolved in that event over your 4 years at Emory.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of ironically, even though I think the 100 is kind of viewed as a sprint event, last year was kind of the big change in my training where I kind of made the big transition from doing mostly sprint training to mostly mid-D training against my will. That was mostly John, our coach, kind of sat down with me at the beginning of last year, my junior season. And we kind of talked about, sophomore year, it was successful. And I A-finaled and it was great, but I was like, I need to figure out how I'm going to kind of, like you said, make that leap and improve because I started swimming, pretty late. I didn't really start until kind of the end of high school. So I was still kind of new and figuring out what worked and didn't work for me. And John obviously is an expert in all of this. And he was like, look, you need to work on your back half because my strategy was kind of send it out as hard as I could and then just try to hold on for the last 50 for the 100. And that's why my 200 also wasn't really going anywhere sophomore year. So beginning junior year, I kind of exclusively started doing mid-distance training under John's direction. And then kind of as a reward every week or so, I get to do a couple sprint practices. But really fully dedicating myself to doing more and more aerobic stuff. Honestly, just aerobic free sets and more middle distance stuff. And then working in the breaststroke once I got that aerobic base built up is something that I started last year and then kind of really have continued doing this year. And I think for me personally, I found out that I don't really need to improve my first 50 as much because I will kind of always have that sprint kind of ability there. But being able to hone in on that aerobic base and that back half has actually helped me tremendously. Like I've started almost back halving my 100 now, which like if you showed my high school coach that, he'd probably think you were talking about like a different person because I used to never be able to do that. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And it's also tremendously helped my 200, which I used to absolutely despise. And now I really enjoy because I've built up that aerobic base and I can kind of finish it and swim it correctly. So honestly, the move towards middle distance training has been, has totally venerated me. I have kind of owe all of my success there to that and to John pushing me towards that, kind of against my will, but that's kind of what I've been doing.
Do you think that's like
Yeah,
applicable to like a lot of other swimmers? Like if say like, there are other breaststrokers in like Division III, would you say like, hey, like if you're struggling with finishing your races, do you think like that's like a general rule that you should try and do some more like middle D, maybe even distance training to try and build up that base?
Yeah, I mean, we have so like our breaststroke group is it's like me, Henri, Benal, and Leong Sun, and like we all pretty much just do middle distance. Like John does not really let us do sprint, even when we're training for the 100, more than one or two times a week. And I honestly think for most people, like doing that middle distance training, the aerobic base can only help you. I think at a core level, most people swimming the 100 have that ability in them to just get a fast first 50, first 35, 50 yards out. I don't think doing more aerobic, I was scared that building up like an aerobic middle distance training would kind of hurt my first 50 because that was where so much of my strength was in the 100 and in the two medley relay also. But I kind of found the exact opposite. And if anything, it helped my stroke get a lot stronger. Like I found that I'm actually going faster in the 200 medley relay, for example, but I'm taking less strokes. Actually, my stroke's a lot stronger because of that aerobic base. So, I mean, I'm not the person to ask about pretty much anything except breaststroke, but I'm assuming that like for any other stroke, it would work the same way, at least on that like aerobic level. So that's what I would think.
Yeah, that's a super interesting way to pivot and kind of build on something where maybe you're not putting as much effort into your training or training a different aspect and kind of train up a different part of your game and see how that can help you. Um, I think another thing we wanted to ask about was obviously going in and making NCAA's as a sophomore in the A final and then improving to national champion in a year. What kind of mental switch or mental preparation did you have going into NCAA's last year that kind of allowed you to move up?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's kind of twofold. Um, the first thing that I really noticed when I sat down and thought about my sophomore year performance was a lot of it was just nervousness and inexperience, right? Because you guys were all in the same position, I believe, like COVID freshman year. Like I had no experience being on that sort of stage or in that sort of environment. And I think it honestly just totally caught me off guard. And I think something as simple as junior year, having a whole 12 months more of experience at those big meets and on that bigger stage really helped me mentally prepare. I think the other thing that's probably a bit more interesting is kind of how I switch my mental game there. I used to think about um, like freshman, sophomore year, if you can even count freshman year, I totally thought of my races and of meets as like a 100% individual thing. Like I would get so stressed out about my races because I would think about every single thing and I would be so honed in on just my individual performance. Like I would be that stereotypical kind of sitting on the bench while other people swimming, like headphones on, like totally tweaking out about my swim. And I had a really long conversation with some of our captains that year, actually, and then with John, our coach. And something that John always says is if you buy into the team environment and buy into kind of the mental idea that you're swimming not for yourself, but for the people around you and for their success, it's going to make it a lot easier. It's going to take the pressure off your shoulders and kind of shift it around the team. And it kind of gives you, it sounds corny, but competing for something bigger than yourself. And I kind of never really bought into it. I totally admit, like my early years on the team. And last year was when I kind of decided I was like, okay, I'm an upperclassman. I need to really buy into this. And I 100% bought into that fact where instead of just trying to swim for myself, my individual performance, I totally tried to frame every meet as just going in to have fun and try to uplift those around me as much as I could. And what I found is that it totally eliminated all of my nervousness, and which was my big limiting factor. Like I never get nervous before a race now, like at all. Like before nationals last year, I was pure like excited, happy to be there, grateful. Like I was not nervous at all. And that I think was the biggest mindset switch for me is now that I'm able to swim and just have fun with it and enjoy where I am and like swim for my teammates versus getting so honed in on my individual performance and putting all that pressure on my shoulders. Like that's totally buying into that has had bigger rewards than I could have imagined. And that is like what I tell anyone like on my team when they ask or any underclassmen when they're like, I'm kind of struggling with because everyone gets nervous and everyone gets, especially coming into college from high school or whatever, it's like trying to view it as being grateful for where you are and having the opportunity to do so for me made it so much easier. John always tells us like it's pretty hard to be nervous or angry and grateful at the same time. And I like totally agree with that. So that's what I've found.
Yeah, I love that. I love that actually. I mean, I've been in a similar place where like freshman year I came in, same thing, like, worried about my own races. And it's so much easier when you're there and you think, hey, I've got like nothing to lose here. I'm just here,
Yeah.
because we're all Division III swimmers, right? Like we're not losing scholarship money. We're not obviously being paid to be here. We're here because we want to be. And I love that sentiment. It's something that I also very much agree with. I just want to backtrack real quick. You said like, hey, like I probably am the only one to give advice on breaststroke. I want to go talk about that. When we went to Denison and watched your races, your 100 breaststroke, your technique looked nothing short of just perfection, right? It's so distinct, and it just looks like you, and you're like you're floating on the water. So, is there anything you want to like share? Like, hey, how can someone else like take some tips and maybe improve their own breaststroke?
Yeah. So My breaststroke is well, it's totally different than it was like even 2 years ago. Um, I think the biggest things that I work on, um, so I'll say like so last year, for example, 2 years ago, my breaststroke was almost totally focused on tempo and just getting as many strokes as possible in the 100, and that was kind of my big focus. And that was fine, but I found that it was kind of limiting. And I found that I didn't really have the like you look at D1s or whatever, or you look at really high level meets and you see people with that strategy, but then you also notice that they're like 6'6", 220. Like I didn't have that physical ability where that tempo would be able to carry me to the times that I wanted to achieve. So I kind of revisited my stroke last year, and I found that I had a lot more like power and glide that I kind of had allowed myself, if that makes sense. Like I kind of assumed that my technique was solely reliant on how many strokes I take, where last year I almost kind of redesigned my stroke with John to be a lot more focused on still like a faster tempo, but trying to maximize like the glide I got out of every single stroke. And a lot of that came from the kick. Like I feel like a lot of people in breaststroke um, really focus, at least when I like go home to my club team. Um, it's like almost entirely folk people only do drills and stuff focusing on the pole and like the hand position and the head position and all that. And while that is important, for me at least, I feel like almost all of my propulsion and all of my glide is from my kick. And that's what we spend like a ton of time, like Henri, Leong, and I with John. Like that's, I would say like 75% of the drills we do is all kick focused and like body position focused. So we do a ton of stuff where it's just kick drills with like arms out on your back, on your stomach, doing various, like we do a ton of stuff where it's just your right leg kicking for X laps and then just your left leg kicking and just getting that feel as to how you can design your kick to maximize the propulsion, like your ankle position, your leg or your hip position. I think and I was literally just home with my club team with some high school kids like a week ago, and they were asking about this. Like the biggest thing I would do and that I still do is work on aligning your kick with your stroke, if that makes sense. Like in breaststroke, when you enter the water with your hands, making sure your kick is aligned with when your hands kind of get in the water to maximize that glide, and working a lot on just getting to know your kick and knowing like because with every breaststroker, that propulsion is going to kind of maximize at a different point in your kick cycle. So knowing when that propulsion is like 100% for you and getting into your line at that 100% mark is like something that I worked a lot on figuring it out. And once you get it, it's like, it's almost kind of crazy how it's like a magic. Like you can just get so much farther and you're so much more efficient. And like you said, like it helps me so much with staying on top of the water and gliding. So I know it's like, it's hard to explain, but that's what John works a ton with us on. And that's what I would say.
No, I totally agree because the timing on the breaststroke kick is just so articulate. Like for me personally, when I do breaststroke, I find that my maximum point is when I literally hit my streamline and then I kick as I'm hitting my streamline. So I kick like a little bit later in
Yeah.
my breaststroke cycle, and that's what works out for me. Another thing I wanted to say is like stroke counts, right? Because when I used to do the two breast, my stroke counts had to be on point because
Yeah.
I would take 6 strokes the first lap off the dive, and the rest I would take 8. If I took any more strokes than that, I just knew I was going to add time. That's just how it
Yeah.
worked. Like in the 100 breaststroke, do you also still count your strokes? Because I feel like that's very important for breaststrokers in particular.
Yeah, so stroke counts are interesting. I don't count at all on the 100. The 200, so the 100, I guess that's not true. I count on the first, like the dive lap, and that's pretty much it. Just because I usually try to be at like 4 or so. But then after that, I at least in my situation, I find that like you said, if you didn't hit 8, kind of in your head, you'd be like, oh, like shit, like this isn't good. I find that it's kind of a mental block sometimes. If you like are focusing too much on your stroke count. So on the 100, when it's kind of just, so many different things, like in breaststroke, if your pullout's a half yard shorter, then your stroke count could be totally different. And I found that if I focus too much on that, it can really throw me off mentally for the rest of the race. So I don't count for the 100. The 200, I think, is totally different just because it's so dependent on that evolution from like starting off long and strong, getting to kind of the increased tempo. So like I have my stroke count for the 200 memorized, right? It's 3, 5, 5, 5, 6. Like I have it in my head and I follow that every time. But I think like that's just a factor of doing it so many times in practice and figuring out like how many strokes can I do? Because there's a point where, you know, the glide starts to hurt you, where you need to increase the tempo. And I think just like doing that yourself in practice and figuring out when does my glide start to slow down? When do I need to increase a stroke, and figuring out like each person's different stroke count? Because like Henri and I, for example, have like totally different stroke counts and it both works for us. So that's what I would say about that.
I think that that's definitely a good thing that you focused on specifically with John, and I think that kind of speaks volumes to like how much you really need to tailor, you know, your breaststroke. Because I just like when Peter was talking, it sort of came to mind for me. I remember last year, like Peter and I always used to go to, you know, swim on Sundays and like film each other and do technique work and stuff. And he would always like tell me like, dude, you got to kick later in your breaststroke. And like, it just never made sense for me because I am not a breaststroker. I just do it in the context of IM, and my propulsion phase in my kick was just like exclusively at the top, like when I brought my feet up to my hamstrings, because I was just like more focused on like the explosive movement than okay, I got to do my next cycle because I don't have a very good kick. So it's definitely interesting on how individualized breaststroke is, one, and two, that, you know, John is sort of willing to work with you guys and definitely understands, you know, how much variance there is from person to person. I mean, we watched it live. I certainly think that you sort of have more of that kick driven, you know, creeping over the water type of stroke.
I totally agree. I think it's like it's probably like my favorite part about breaststroke is how everybody's stroke can be so different and yet still work so well for them. Because like you mentioned, like watching Henri and I swim together, he probably comes out of the water like 8 inches higher than I do. And it's like it's not like one is right or wrong. It's just everything works for that person. And obviously John and all the coaches at Emory, like John, we know what John knows about breaststroke. Like he showed that in the past with Andrew Wilson and all that. But yeah, working with him and developing that has been awesome.
Kind of similar to Griffin, I guess, as like a breaststroker solely in the context of the 400 IM. Like I've been struggling a lot with like figuring out how to get my streamline correct, because when I swim breaststroke, it's just like my hips sink to the ground. Like I just can't figure it out. The kick is terrible. And it's something I've tinkered with a lot this fall semester, and like it's working a little bit, but I'm definitely not quite there where I figured out what works the best for me. But yeah, I think that's something super important to take note of. If somebody's like a breaststroker, that there's no really correct way to swim breaststroke, especially it's kind of unique that way.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
was gonna say this because like obviously like the hip sinking is a huge problem, right? But I was just reminded of this actually at my morning practice. We are doing a breaststroke set, and they said something that our coaches say at my club team is that you want to think about breaststroke as swimming downhill, like a downhill motion. I want to see like here like if do you really like agree with that? Because when you're swimming downhill, obviously your hips are gonna pop up, right? That's something that I've been doing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that too, and I think like in general, I think that's right. Just because I know so many people struggle with like keeping their hips up as they swim, especially like when you get tired at the end of 100 or 200, you start to like go like this. Um, I think in general, like I think that's good. I agree with that. John likes to kind of say that as well. He likes to kind of make us how I've always gotten better at keeping my hips up is I found that a lot of it like relies on my head position. I know my stroke is a lot different than some people because a lot of people will swim and they'll when they like take their when they sweep in and do their in pull, they'll kind of like pop their head up, if that makes sense. Like I'm sure you've seen like people will take their breath and they'll kind of go like this. And I found that a lot of times what that does is like if you bring your head up, it'll push your hips down. And I think when you think about swimming downhill, that's like a good way to kind of like actively think about not doing that and keeping your head in more of a stable position. John actually has us do a drill where we swim breaststroke and we have a tennis ball and we like tuck it under our chin. So like when you take your breath, you like can't let the tennis ball fall out. And I thought that was pretty interesting. We also do, I'm sure you guys like a ton of stuff with weight belts to kind of train those like your abs and your hips to prevent your hips from falling. But I agree with that. I think the biggest things that have helped me with it is thinking about head position, and then we just do a ton of ab work too, because your abs is what's holding them up.
Yeah, I've done the tennis ball drill with the wiffle ball. I've also done this one where you get like a strap and you strap a PVC pipe to the back of your head so that your whole spine stays in line. I've done that
Oh
too. That
wow, I
I think
haven't
that's
heard of that
also
one.
that one hurts actually because if you're like, off like you have like a PVC pipe like whacking your head,
Right.
it's not very fun. But it definitely is it is a drill. I feel like breaststroke, as we've established already, is just such a meticulous stroke and it's just so different for everybody. I think it's very, very key that you try and find like what works for you. And clearly you have, and it's paying off. That's great to see.
Yeah, it took me a couple years, but yeah, hopefully I'm finally getting there.
Yeah, so I guess kind of to circle back, you talked about John and his coaching. Obviously, know Emory's like a perennial national title contender. The team culture there is like one of winning, and everybody there, shows up and works hard, expects to win. And obviously, like a lot of the other top Division III schools, Emory's like a very well-renowned and well-respected academic institution. So how is that environment of not only the team culture, but coming into such a good academic culture as well? Like, how has that affected you as a swimmer and academically as well?
Yeah, so I'm sure I can speak for everyone on here and probably everyone in D3 when they say that like academics was, if not 50%, more than 50% of their motivation for choosing to like A, some Division III, and B, like choosing what school to attend. For me, like I was kind of all over the place when I was recruiting. Like I'm from Columbus, so I was going like went on visits to Ohio State. I was at Williams, like I was at all these Division III places. I was at like the Naval Academy. I was literally all over the board. And then Emory, like the culture there, obviously you said of excellence stood out to me. And John likes to emphasize, and the team culture emphasizes excellence kind of in and out of the pool, like excellence in everything that we choose to partake in, like extracurriculars, athletics, academics. And I think for me, um, and something that I noticed at some larger schools that I had friends at and connections at is that for me at least, sometimes when there is too much of an emphasis on excellence per se, like too much of a focus on swimming, for example, is the one that I would notice, then it would require like all of your focus, if that makes sense. And the people on that team, like it would make it tough for me to devote myself to two different causes if I felt like one was being kind of heavily favored over another. What I found at Emory and every D3 program I visited is that this culture of excellence in all that you kind of ascribe to was awesome because not only is everyone there committed to doing well and at the meet you're going to, everyone's just as committed to doing well in like the midterm that you all have when you get back from the meet. And that really is something that I love because it makes it easy to kind of jump into that culture and like understand, okay, I'm here A to swim, but also to get an amazing education and to do amazing things on the extracurriculars on campus. So it's affected me really positively in both spheres because I can honestly say that like pursuing excellence, like in academics, for example, definitely flows over to pursuing excellence in athletics. Like those habits are one and the same. I don't think they're separate at all. And obviously, I'm sure you got like everybody agrees varsity athletes do better in the classroom because like those habits bleed over. Like it's one and the same. So I would say like the question of how it's affected me, I think it's totally helped me because the culture of winning and that culture of trying your best and everything bleeds over between both spheres.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that's kind of the universal experience with a lot of at least our teammates and people we've spoken to on other teams. Everybody seems to put a super big focus into not only, succeeding in the pool, but being like a well-rounded, successful person, whether that be, academics, internships, extracurriculars, all those sorts of things. I think that's kind of the beauty of D3 swimming. is that we all get to partake in all these aspects of our life that we're interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think yeah, I think you said it perfectly. Being around, and I think being around people who are as committed and as devoted to these same goals as you, like at all these D3 programs, and like obviously this goes for any sort of program like in college, not just D3, but being surrounded by like those successful people, I think has driven me. And I think that's another kind of benefit that I really liked.
As you yeah, as we talk about sort of the opportunities that swimming at Emory and being D3 have provided you, we always like to give our listeners an opportunity to sort of see people that we interviewed not only as a swimmer but as, you know, someone outside of the pool and sort of as a holistic person. Can you talk a little bit about Jake Meyer outside of the pool?
Yeah, so let's see. I think like my biggest um extracurricular that I've been involved in at Emory has been, I'm actually wearing the sweatshirt right now. Emory Impact Investing Group is like a big thing I'm involved in, which obviously I actually got introduced to by somebody on the swim team 3 years ago. So there's kind of a perfect example, but we're like a club at Emory that invests in kind of marginalized small businesses in Atlanta. I've been involved in that for 3 years, and like while I've been there, we've loaned out like over, I think it's $85,000 now to these like small businesses in Atlanta. So that's been awesome. And like, I've loved being involved in that. Super meaningful to me. That's my big extracurricular that I've kind of balanced with swimming. Other than that, I'm a double major at Emory. So Emory has like a business school that's it's like Emory College of Arts and Sciences, and then the business school's separate, but you can interstudy like between them. So I'm a double major in finance and philosophy, which is kind of a weird combo, but philosophy is just like one of my interests that I had in high school and going in, and Emory makes it pretty easy to double major. So those are my two majors. And yeah, finance is like my main one. So I interned, done various like pretty, you know, typical finance internships, but was in Chicago with an investment bank this past summer, which, you know, made the training kind of tough sometimes. But then that's where I'm returning there to do banking after graduation in Chicago. So yeah, I think all that's been like, I wouldn't even say helped by swimming. I would say enabled by swimming. Like I think it's been the main driver. Again, being surrounded by, I've seen people achieve these amazing things, and obviously not just in finance, like even just like the microcosm of my roommates at school. Like I've got some other super successful people in finance, and then two of my roommates are going to med school and are amazingly successful. And being around these people that are doing these great things has just encouraged me, and then getting these great habits. So yeah, I mean, outside of swimming, it's I would say that that's kind of my main commitments. But yeah, it's been great. I've enjoyed all of it.
That's super awesome. That's awesome that Emory allows you guys you know, the opportunity to be in that club and sort of facilitate good throughout Atlanta as well. And that definitely answers your question, Josh, about sort of how the environment at Emory has, you know, translated a lot of success around the board. So congratulations on that, Jake.
Thanks.
I got a question for you, Jake. Um, you are currently 0.05 seconds off the trials cut in the 100 breaststroke. Are you trying to make that?
Oh man, yeah, don't remind me. Yeah, so we showed up to that long course thing at Denison, and I hadn't swam the 100 breast long course since like I don't even know, sophomore year or something, because I never swam club in high school really. So like I never really did long course, but yeah, that was super fun. And like I got to go get like totally destroyed by Henri, which was fun. Because he's like out there breaking the French national record and everything. And that was awesome. So yeah, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think at nationals this year there's going to be like another time trial.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go for it. I think it'd be fun. Just to go, it's be a fun milestone. I haven't exactly determined like how attending it would work because my job would probably start like right around that same time. but hopefully if I can like I'd be able to convince them to give me a couple days off to go. Well, I also would have to figure out like I'm sure there'd be a group of us. I'm sure some other people on Emory would get the cut, and then a group of them would stay training. At the very least, like Henri would stay training through the meet. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go for it. Just because it's fun and long course is a nice change of pace from short course. It's definitely kind of humbling sometimes because I'll like get halfway and I'm like, oh, this is fine. There should be a wall coming up, and then I'll like come up and I'm still like not even halfway down the pool. So
Yeah.
it's fun. So yeah, I think so.
I'm just a long course. I'm just so much better at long course. Like these guys will attest every single time. Like my walls are just they're really bad. So long course, I sell out. I I don't know if this is the same case for you, but I'm pretty sure it is considering like, as you said, you haven't really done much of long course, but I just never really thought about trials until like, I got reasonably close and I'm like, oh wow, this is like suddenly a realistic goal. And it's and just the fact that, you're close, it has to be just a great feeling.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. And honestly, like, I got out and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I was like, "No, it's okay." Because I like it's not a huge it wasn't like a huge overarching goal that I had, but you're right. Now that I realize that I'm close and like reasonably close, like not like I was in high school where I'm like, "Oh, I'm 2.5 seconds off." It's like, no, I'm pretty close now. So yeah, I think it's a pretty fun it was fun and it's a goal that I'd be happy to achieve. And I think it's kind of you know, the kind of classic like pinnacle long course goal to achieve. So I'm excited about it.
If you want to take my 2 cents on it, I was taught in long course swimming is that you always have to think about trying to build into the last like 15 meters of each 50. Because the thing is that like most time, like you're used to having that wall as like kind of a break, right? So when you don't have it, it's very easy to like slow down as you're going through like the 50, right? So you have to think about ramping up your tempo maybe on that last
Yeah,
15 meters so you can make sure you don't slow down and you can still hit the wall with the same intensity you would on short course, right?
yeah, that makes sense. That's definitely where I struggle because like whenever I swim long, like we did a set last year where we switched our pool to long course and did like 30, it was like PTSD for me to even think about it. It was like 30 50s all out with like everyone did like three fast, one easy or something. And then sprint got to do like one fast, four easy or some ridiculous set. But yeah, I mean, I did that with, I was next to Henri and Leong, who are both like amazing long course swimmers. And my first 20 meters or whatever would be so strong. And then I would just slowly start fading. So it's fun. It's like forces me to kind of work parts of my stroke because my stroke is like extremely short course tailored. Like I'm very familiar with like my walls and my pullouts, and that's probably the strongest part of my stroke. And there I don't get it, so it's fun. It's a fun challenge to like work on other things that I don't normally get to work on.
Yeah, definitely. I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, some of the Emory group went to the Knoxville Pro Series. Are you guys planning on doing that again? Maybe as like another last chance to get some of those trials cuts or
Yeah, unfortunately, we are not because it's in our training trip down to Sarasota. Like it's within that time frame. We actually I just talked to John about this before we left for break, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we're planning on it because it would interfere with our training trip, is what he was telling me. Um, but yeah, we did go last year, and it was a lot of fun. Like we all piled into this like crappy like Emory van and drove up to Knoxville and stayed in like a Marriott or something and then went to that meet and it was pretty fun. And obviously like we had guys doing really well at the meet. Like we had Jason Hamilton's not here anymore, but he was like a still is he still trains like a long course like breaststroke savant. So he was there like finaling in all these events and I was there getting like 50th. So yeah, it was fun. I wish we were going again, but I don't think we are, unfortunately.
A little off topic, but you're going to Sarasota, right? Are you guys going to be swimming in the Shark Tank?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, I love that pool. That pool is actually really nice.
It
It's
is
really
awesome.
nice.
Yeah, we've gone there every year.
Do you know, just off topic, the Auburn swim team, they were originally in another pool, but they actually had to move pools because the pool temperature was poorly regulated, and they actually swim in the Shark Tank too. So you're gonna be using that. after them.
Oh, really? Like this break they did, or they
Yep,
are?
yep. They already finished their train trip. It was like last
Oh,
week for
got
them,
it.
but they also swim the Shark Tank. Yeah.
That's funny. Ryan Gibbons is a senior on the team, and I think his sister swims for Auburn. I think he might have mentioned that to me, so that's funny. Yeah, we always see a ton of other people there. Like I forget there were a bunch of other teams there when we went last year, and we had all these like ridiculous time slots. Like we'd have like a 8 o'clock time slot in the morning, then we'd come back at like 7:30 p.m. or something because there's just so many teams there. But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, last year we were rocking the 8 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah,
practice, which was just awful.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess kind of one last kind of question to wrap it up. I guess going into your last semester of NCAA collegiate swimming, if you were kind of to look back at your career at Emory, what would be kind of your most surprising or unexpected or one of your favorite memories along your swimming journey at Emory?
Yeah. Oof. I mean, obviously there's been a lot. I think the cliche answer would be like winning nationals. That was pretty cool. Hopefully I can do that again this year, knock on wood. But I honestly think the coolest memory I have was weirdly like during COVID. So 3 years ago, which makes me feel like really old. But during COVID, COVID was already, as you guys all know, like a super screwed up year. And then I actually had a pretty like severe, I didn't swim at all because I had like a pretty crazy injury freshman year. So I have like that, I have like that big scar on my chest. So I had to get surgery for something called thoracic outlet syndrome, which is like apparently pretty common in swimmers. And I actually know like a couple guys, like on Denison, for example, they've gotten it, but it's like when your rib kind of pushes against your arm. And long story short, like I had to go in and get my rib taken out. And this was in like October of my freshman year. So I just moved in. Like I already had no idea what was going on. I'd like met John in person like one time, and then I was immediately in the hospital for like 12 days. And I remember FaceTiming my roommates at the time. I've had the same like group of roommates freshman year to now. And I remember they were like our seniors at the time. We were training with we would drive every day like 25 minutes from campus at 5 a.m. to go train with Dynamo Swim Club in Georgia. Um, oh no way. Yeah. So we would go train with them at like 5 a.m. Like 3 times a week or something crazy. Um, and I remember the captains at the time had organized like a impromptu meet. And all the other freshmen were like so excited like so excited to swim in it and whatever. And I was stuck in the hospital. And I remember like um I was just so down bad and I was like so sad. And I remember I was so worried that like I wouldn't fit in to the team or I wouldn't fit into like the swim culture because I'd missed so much from being injured. And I remember coming back from the like super long break that we had during COVID and just being like so welcomed by the upperclassmen in my class and um, immediately like being brought into the fold, even though I missed pretty much every team swim oriented activity the first semester. And I kind of like had the realization there. I was like, oh man, like this is where I want to be. And since then, like that's still probably like my favorite memory, which is ironic because it was probably like the worst time across the country for Division III swimming. But that's probably my favorite like broad memory. And yeah, it's been a great experience. Emory is everything I can ask for. If anyone's watching this and is like, oh, should I go to Emory? Yeah, you should reach out to John Petroff. But it's been great. I really enjoyed it and couldn't have asked for anything more.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Just to add on like one really quick one. We say here on the Anchor Lake podcast that experience is one of the biggest factors in determining how well you swim at like end of season meets. Is there any wisdom you have to share to someone who's maybe just starting and aiming to compete at the Division III level, like maybe on the level like you are, right? What do you have to say?
Yeah, I think my biggest my biggest advice would be I kind of already touched on this earlier, so I hope it's not like a broken record, but my biggest advice would be to always stay like grateful for where you are and humble and realizing like how much more you have to improve and how much you can learn from other people. I think my biggest improvement last year was when I basically started copying everything that Jason Hamilton did. So that was like a big realization for me. It's like, holy crap, I'm surrounded by all these super successful swimmers. This is kind of like a gold mine for me to learn as much as I can from them. So my biggest advice would be like recognize that no matter what level you're at, like there's so much you can take from the people around you. And that's why I think it's so important to get in a community or a team culture where they're willing to share and willing to learn that, like, or excuse me, you're willing to learn. And I think like the biggest thing for me is just stay like grateful for the team you're at and this position you're in. And like just try to put your head down and improve as much as you can. And at the end of the day, like at any meet you're at, just trying to kind of swim for the people around you and staying as grateful as you can is just the biggest thing that I've found has had a lot of success for me. And a lot of really loud music, like 40 seconds before you swim, is kind of the other piece of the puzzle for me.
I'm right there with you on that one.
Awesome.
The music does make or break the deal. Before we wrap
Yeah.
this one up, is there anyone we should keep on our radar following maybe on Emory, maybe in Division 3? Who are you looking out for? Who are you shouting out here?
I'm gonna shout out my breaststroke Emory boys. So Henri, Leong, Cooper. I mean, there's so many. Like I can't even I don't even want to list them all because I would just fear that I would miss somebody. Johnny Bradshaw is Emory sprinter who's doing amazing this year. All of our relays, I mean, like I think our relays are kind of just speaking for ourselves right now, but everyone's been killing it this year. All of my roommates, Harrison, Logan, Will, Alex, like everyone's doing great. So, but if you want someone to talk to, I guess yeah, you should talk to I don't even know. You should talk to I don't know if you guys know Nick Goody.
I know Nick Goody. I know Nick
Yeah.
Goody.
Oh yeah, yeah. He'd be great. You guys should talk to Henri Benal, especially if you have anyone up there in Cleveland who can speak French, bring them on. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like the whole team's been doing amazing. It's been awesome to watch, and I have the privilege of being captain this year and watching them all do amazing. So yeah, it's been awesome, and I'm really looking forward to March and hopefully ending it on a strong note. But no matter what happens, should be fun.
No, I bet. I bet. I think that about wraps it up for this episode. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.